What's up, guys? It's Eric from Rare Canning, and today we're back with another entry into our Tech It Out series where we take a look at different deck archetypes and we see what we can pair with them to try to better prepare them for different metagames or different matchups. So, if you may have noticed from the thumbnail, it actually looks a little bit different than that of the previous Tech It Out videos, and it's actually for kind of a reason this time. So, the Tech It Out series has gotten a little bit of an overhaul. I just got thinking not too long ago, and I decided I don't think the previous versions of the series were really as effective as they could be. So what do I mean by that? If you've seen our previous videos that we've done, like I said, it's the same concept. We're taking a look at a certain archetype, and we're seeing what we can pair with it to prepare it for different matchups. But the problem I think we were having with these videos is that we were just giving out 3 solid lists for each of these different ideas that we had. And that doesn't sound too bad, but really, do you really need to go over, for example, how many Sycamores we're playing or how many Ultra Balls we're playing in each of these different lists? So even though I thought they were decent, solid videos, I don't think they were as effective as they could be. So no longer are we doing entire lists for the Tech It Out series. Even though I know that's nice because it'll give you something to immediately start testing with, I don't think they are, like I said, as effective as they could be. I really just want to talk about concepts here and not specific card counts. So, like I said, we're giving the Tech It Out series a bit of an overhaul, and I really hope you guys like it. It actually requires a little bit more work on my end to prepare this, since there's a little bit more design that goes into it. So, I hope you enjoy it, but so let's get right into it and see what our Tech It Out series looks like now. So like I said, it's the same concept as before, and so this time we're taking a look at Yanmega and Yanmega BREAK. So this is, we've talked about before, one of our more favorite cards from the Steam Siege set that came out, and it's an extremely versatile card, so I think it lends itself very well to this Tech It Out series. So let's take a look at Yanmega and Yanmega BREAK and see what make them actually worth talking about to begin with. So Yanmega is a stage 1, it has 110 hit points. It has the ability Sonic Vision. If you have 4 cards in your hand, ignore all energy costs for his attacks, which is great. If anyone played during the Heart Gold Soul Silver days, Yanmega Prime had a similar type of, I believe it was Pokey Body at the time, that did something similar, which was immensely powerful. Attacking for 0 energy is pretty good, as long as the attacks are decent, of course. So let's take a look at the actual attacks that Yanmega has to use. So it has the attack Assault Boom for 3 colorless, or hopefully 0 energy in our case. It does 50 damage, plus 70 more if your opponent has a tool card attached to them. So I think a lot of times you will actually be hitting for 120, since there are a lot of popular tool cards in the format. You know, we have Floatstone, Fighting Fury Belt, Spirit Links, etc. So there's just a lot of different tool cards that are in pretty much most decks, I think. And the 120 itself is actually really nice because that 2-shots pretty much every relevant card in the format. So I think, like, even as far as Mega Pokemon go, the only really popular ones only have around 220 hit points at max. So you're definitely going to be comfortably 2-shotting these cards, I think. And even Fighting Fury Belted EXs, or even non-Fighting Fury Belted EXs, you'll be able to knock them out in 2 shots with Yanmega. So because it's a non-EX, you give pretty much a good prize trade, is what I'm trying to say here. So even though you have to 2-shot them, you're only giving up 1 prize. So Assault Boom is definitely really nice, but there's going to be instances where your opponent doesn't run tool cards, or they're smart enough to realize, hey, Yanmega does more damage if I attach my tools, so I'm going to just not play down my tools. So Yanmega definitely needs alternate ways to do damage. And so that's, I guess, kind of where the break will come in. So we have Yanmega BREAK, has 140 hit points. Not a huge buff, but it does increase it by, 30 hit points, which is nice. And it does have the Barrier Break attack for the same energy cost. It does 100 damage, but it's not affected by weakness, resistance, or any other effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. So even though you can't hit for weakness, which is a little annoying, just because you can't one-shot things like Zygarde EX, it does go through things like Glaceon EX, which is really nice because Glaceon has seen a little bit of play here and there, and it has this attack, I believe it's called Crystal Ray, prevents damage done to it by your opponent's evolution Pokemon. So Yanmega will be able to go through that if you do for some reason play against some sort of Glaceon deck or a deck that runs Glaceon. So, and the rest of the Yanmega stats, it has a lightning weakness, which isn't too relevant. I think the only popular lightning Pokemon in the new standard format is probably going to be Zebstrika, and so Zebstrika isn't uncommon to see, but it's not a card that you see in every deck, so it has a pretty decent weakness, and fighting resistance is also pretty nice. That means you do resist things like Zygarde EX. And free retreat, so that's another, I think actually a huge plus to this card. So I think actually some of Yanmega's biggest strengths are the fact that you don't have to run much energy, and you also don't really have to run many or any switching cards either, depending on what you decide to pair with it. So that's, I think, Yanmega's biggest strength. It just allows for so much extra space in the deck for extra sort of utility cards or fringe cards that you normally wouldn't be able to fit into other decks. So Yanmega is just a very versatile card, but that's not to say it doesn't have some downsides. I think the most obvious and glaring one is it is extremely weak to ability lock. And with Garbodor kind of increasing in popularity ever since the end of the previous format, that could definitely pose a problem for Yanmega. So Garbodor, for example, if it has a tool card attached to it, it shuts off all abilities in play. Greninja is another deck. Even though you hit Greninjas for weakness, Greninja has the attack Shadow Stitching, which does shut off your abilities. So Greninja can also be a problem. And then just a lot of decks run Hex Maniac as well. So there's definitely a lot of different ways to deal with Yanmega. So that's why it needs a good partner. To be honest, I'm not sure if you can actually make an entire deck based solely around Yanmega, just because you kind of auto lose to these types of decks like I'm talking about. So we'll definitely have a lot of partners to get to, but the first thing I want to talk about is ways to augment Yanmega and Yanmega Break's damage output. So for example, Barrier Break only does 100 damage, which means you can't knock out Shamans with it. Muscle Band has also been rotated out of format, so I think that's a big problem in itself. And sometimes they might play down a tool on their Shaman, but I think if you're playing as a solid player, most often they will probably not attach a tool to their Shamans, just because you would be able to knock them out in one hit. So we definitely need other ways to be able to clean up games by knocking out Shamans and just ensure that we can always two-shot people. So the first way I want to talk about to increase Yanmega's damage output is going to be Ariados. So Ariados is another grass type, and it has the ability Poisonous Nest. It's an ability, whenever you use it, it poisons both active Pokemon other than grass types, which is really nice because, again, if we're going to be talking about Shamans, for example, we can Lysander a Shaman, use Poisonous Nest to poison Shaman, and then knock it out with Barrier Break. So it's really good. And also, too, if we're going in some sort of Mega deck, like let's just say Mega Rayquaza, for example, and they opt to evolve without their Spirit Links, we're going to need a way to knock them out in 2 hits. So we can use Barrier Break to do 100, Poisonous Nest puts them up to 110 in between turns, 120 after they pass back to us, and then Barrier Break again to knock it out in 2 hits. So Ariados is definitely important as far as the math goes for certain knockouts. And I also forgot to even mention, Yanmega is grass type, so that means we can abuse things like Forest of Giant Plants, and also Ariados can abuse that as well. The Stadium card that lets grass Pokemon evolve on their first turn. So this is really good because it allows Yanmega to attack potentially on the second turn of the game. So that's pretty powerful, I think, for 0 energy. So Ariados is going to be the first way we can start to increase that damage output. And like I said, we can increase it quicker thanks to things like Forest of Giant Plants. But the other card we can use is going to be Bursting Balloon. So Bursting Balloon is a card that's been pretty popular in certain decks, Trevenant and Greninja most notably. But it's a tool card. Whenever it's attached to your active Pokemon, if your opponent attacks that Pokemon, they take 6 damage counters, but you do have to discard Bursting Balloon at the end of your opponent's next turn. So it kind of punishes them for being aggressive, and also if you're not running Ariados, or let's just say that you can't get it in play for whatever reason, maybe it's prized, Bursting Balloon will allow you to have another way at turning your 1-hit or your 3-hit knockouts into 2-hit knockouts. So that's why we're opting to play that. Like I said, Muscle Band's gone, so we definitely need some other way to increase our damage. So that's it as far as, I guess, other ways to power up Yanmega even more. But really, like I said, at the end of the day, Yanmega needs a partner. It just really does. Otherwise, it loses pretty hard to these ability locking decks and cards. So there's actually a few different options to play with Yanmega. I think one of the biggest strengths of Yanmega is the fact that it doesn't rely on much energy. So we don't really want energy-heavy attackers. So these are going to be cards that can attack for a single attachment and are also pretty fast to get out. So think double colorless energy. We're hoping to just use support Pokemon and backup attackers that take DCE and nothing less. That way we don't have to play a bunch of energy in our deck. So the first one we're actually going to talk about, like I just mentioned, was Zebstrika. So if you've seen our previous coverage of Yanmega from the Worlds format, we actually did a deck profile on Yanmega and Zebstrika together. It proved to be a pretty decent pairing, and I think it's still a solid idea for the new standard format too. So Zebstrika is a cool card, has the ability Zap Zone, damage done by the attacks of your lightning Pokemon aren't affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. So that means you will go through things like Glaceon, for example. Also, if you are attacking into a Rayquaza EX, for example, and they have Altaria, I believe that means your attacks go through Altaria's ability that normally prevent colorless Pokemon from being affected by weakness. So really solid ability, and then the attack is Crashing Bolt. For just a double colorless, like I said, just for a single attachment, it is 50 plus 60 more if your opponent's active Pokemon has a fighting resistance. So this is really good because we can knock out things like Mega Rayquaza in one hit, Yveltal EX, etc. Baby Yveltal. Even if we go against another Yanmega deck, Zebstrika can just knock it out in one hit. So Zebstrika is a pretty good attacker just because it easily one-shots a lot of popular Pokemon that are currently in the game. And it's also nice because there's another support Pokemon that we're going to get to in a second that will require Skyfield, but Zebstrika actually doesn't require any weird stadiums or anything else to really have a solid damage output. So you can still continue to play your Forest of Giant Plants with Zebstrika. So, like I was saying, we have another support Pokemon that requires Skyfield though, and that's actually going to be Raichu. So Raichu is another lightning type, so it's good against things like Yveltal, Rayquaza, etc. But Raichu's cool. It has the Circle Circuit attack. It does 20 times the number of bench Pokemon you have for just a double colorless energy. So if you have a Skyfield out, you can hit for 160, which is pretty good. There's definitely some trade-offs between Zebstrika and Raichu if you are looking for a lightning type backup attacker. Raichu is level ball searchable, whereas Zebstrika is not. Raichu also has free retreat, which Zebstrika does not. Raichu is also more versatile in other matchups, whereas Zebstrika is only useful in a handful. But the big downside to Raichu, to really be a decent backup attacker, I think you will have to cut Forest in favor of Skyfield. Just because you're just going to max out at 100 damage otherwise, which that's not too much better than Yanmega Break's attack. So you're still three-shotting a lot of cards. So there's definitely pros and cons if you are looking for a lightning type backup attacker. Raichu is definitely more versatile, easier to get out, free retreat, but with Zebstrika, you won't have to cut your Forest to do large amounts of damage to these Pokemon that it can attack. So definitely some trade-offs here. You'll have to weigh that for yourself to see which route you would prefer to go. But the next backup attack we're going to talk about is Zoroark. So Zoroark is a dark type, 100 hit points, has that awesome ability Stand In. Once during your turn before you attack, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you may switch it with your active. Yanmega has free retreat anyway, so I'm not sure how useful Zoroark might be. Maybe if like a Shaman or something is stranded active, Stand-In can prove to be useful, but really we're concentrating on Zoroark mainly for the attack, Mind Jack. Again, just for double colorless energy, it does 10 plus 30 more for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So this is cool because we can hit the same numbers that Raichu can without the need for Skyfield. So if your opponent has a full bench, I believe it's 160 damage that we're doing, which is really good. So we don't have to cut our Forest of Giant Plants, and we can still hit for big numbers like that as well. The downside to Zoroark, it's not level ball searchable, and it has 2 retreat costs, so we will actually have to start running some sort of switching cards like Floatstone, more than likely, in order to properly retreat Zoroark, just because we don't really want to discard our double colorless energies if we don't have to. So that's kind of the trade-off there. Like, each of these attackers has their own strengths. Zoroark is really good, like I said, because it has the versatility of Raichu, but also you don't have to discard your Forest of Giant Plants. But Zebstrika can more easily take one-hit knockouts on certain popular Pokemon. So again, they each have something that the other doesn't. And then the last backup attacker we're going to talk about is going to be Vespiquen. So Vespiquen is another stage 1 that attacks for a double colorless energy, 90 hit points, so level ball searchable. That is really good already. Grass type, which means it can also abuse Forest of Giant Plants, really good. Free retreat, even better. So Vespiquen has a lot going for it just in its basic stats, but we're mainly looking at for its attack, Be Revenge. So for a double colorless, it is 20 plus 10 more for every Pokemon in your discard pile. So Vespiquen's proven to be extremely popular. It actually won U.S. Nationals this past year. It's been a great card really since it's been released, but I think a lot of players are writing it off currently just because Battle Compressor recently got rotated. It is no longer available for use in standard format. So I think a lot of people have been quick to dismiss Vespiquen to say, oh, you can't power up Be Revenge as easily. But there are ways you can deal with this. So even though Battle Compressor is no longer in format, you can opt to play something like a heavy count of Acrobike in your deck. So Acrobike's a trainer card, or I'm sorry, an item card. It lets you look at the top 2 cards of your deck, you discard one and keep the other. So you can use this to fuel Be Revenge. You can play cards like Unknown in your list as well. That way you don't have to run Shaman, you can just run Acrobikes and Unknowns. So that'll power up your Vespiquens and allow you to draw through your deck pretty quickly. The downside to Vespiquen, like I said, it has all these great stats, and even though you can power up Be Revenge, I don't think it's as easy to power up as it once was. So I think in the early games, Vespiquen is not as strong as some of these other stage 1s that we're looking at. But I definitely think it has great late game potential. Vespiquen's always been known to be able to hit for some pretty scary numbers in the late game once a lot of stuff has been knocked out and discarded. So, and like we said, it's also grass type, so it can abuse Forest of Giant Plants as well. So each of these, I think, definitely have their own merits to them. I think, like the nature of this video series, it's kind of just about choosing what is going to be best for the metagame you're expecting to see. So you have a lot of different options to pick from there. And so yeah, guys, that is actually going to be pretty much it for this entry into Tech It Out. I mean, there might be other options that I'm forgetting, and if I am, definitely feel free to let us know below in the comments as well. But I hope you enjoyed this new style of video. Like I said, I don't think exact counts of cards are really as important in these types of Tech It Out videos, as opposed to just going in depth about the actual concepts themselves. So, hope you liked it. Like I said, I always want to hear your feedback, so let me know in the comments below if you like this new style video, if you hate it. Like I said, I want to know your feedback. But either way, I appreciate you guys watching. Feel free to like and subscribe. Don't forget to check out our merch over at Rare Candy TCG as well. We just got some new items in stock. And I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you for the next one, okay?